Hi guys, this is Deer here with my first YouTube video. I was watching this guy, Reed, and he was making this really cool video about solar systems so you don't need a charge controller. So I went and bought 2 kilowatts of solar panels, got them all wired up, and they're gonna charge this battery lickety split. Now I sort of just rigged it up to some jumper cables here. So let's connect this one. All right, here we go. Greetings everyone, welcome to Ground Zero Solar. This is your host Reed. It took a while for me to get this video prepared for you because that strange guy Deer was out here messing with stuff, my arch nemesis. And he decided to try hooking up a battery to a large solar array without a charge controller in place. And you saw the explosion, it's pretty big. So I had to wait 30 days for the fallout and the radiation to reside. Then I could clean things up. Now I can finally get back to making the video for you guys. Amazingly, the construction crew to rebuild my house was really efficient. It took about 10 days for them to do it. I was impressed. All right, let's actually talk about some next set of solar components, the charge controller. And they're actually really important little devices. What their primary role and job to do is they take the solar power out of your array and they make certain it goes to where it needs to go and doesn't destroy your system. And what I'm saying about destroy, meaning that your batteries don't become overcharged, boiled dry. Because of those higher, kilowatt arrays and all that, yeah, they could boil lead acid batteries dry. And lithium batteries, well, do you happen to live right next to a fire station? Yeah, it would be a bad thing. I'm touchy about lithium batteries, but we'll get to batteries another time. But that's what the main thing a charge controller does. It takes the energy from the solar panel array and it gets it into your system and then regulates it. So that when things are full, charged up and everything else, it cuts off the solar array so it can't overcharge anything or cause any damages. And then of course, if you're running loads and stuff like that, it takes the energy, makes certain it gets to the inverter, and you can use your loads, or if you got DC loads, you can use your DC loads directly and run from there. They're really, really handy. Now there's a couple different types of charge controllers on the market. There's 2 types. One's an older design, and it's called PWM charging, and the other one's called MPPT. And let me tell you about these, and I've got some example controllers here, and I'll show you guys and explain them a bit. Now let's start with something old. Now I say old because this thing's about 2 decades old, about 20 years, and it actually works just fine. It's a Sunsaver 6 from Morningstar. It handles a whole whopping 6 amps. Now if you run that in 12 volts, you're talking around 40 watts of power. And that's not much, not a lot, right? But this is really made for like DC lighting systems like that. Like if you want to make a little tiny solar system that would run a light fixture in like a off-grid shed, or it's too far away to actually run electricity easily, stuff like that, or you're just lazy, you don't want to dig the trench. This would be a good option to get lighting in there and work really well. Now I'm going to actually hook this thing back up and set up a bunch of lights out in my garden, light up some pathways and like that. Little lights though, like 1/4 of a watt or something like that. But just to light little things up and make it easy so you can walk through the things at night and not trip over them horribly and smash your face in. That's always a bad thing. That's a little tiny charge controller. Now this thing uses the old style charging methodology. It's a PWM controller. And that means that you need a solar panel rated for 12 volts. You can't use those high voltage ones that you see on the market and other things like that. They would cook this. I mean, it wouldn't survive that. But standard 12 volt solar panel made for 12 volt charging batteries, so meaning put out like 16, 17 volts, right around there. Work great for this. Thing will live on for decades more, I'm certain. And I'll get that hooked up and we'll have it as a little solar project video. It should be fun. Now let me show you another one that's the big brother of the one I just showed you. This one's an older one too. I've had this one since about 2003 or 4, and it still works just fine. It's a ProStar 15. This one handles 15 amps of power. It's not a huge amount more, but it is a little bit more than double. So I think this one's around 100 watts total, like that. Now this one also works really well, very reliable, and it can be used for lighting controls like that. And it's not for really big, giant solar systems, but it does the job and does it very well. And it uses PWM, and you need a 12-volt solar panel to work with 12 volts. I think this guy also does 24, or maybe that wasn't the option on this one when I bought it. I don't remember. But it also manages to exercise the batteries. Like if you need equalization charges, this thing can do that, so on. Now these both controllers I just showed you, they are mainly for lead acid type batteries. You could also probably run them against nickel iron or nickel cadmium batteries with any problems. But lithium, definitely not a go for these ones. They don't deal with that well at all. But other than that, these are extremely reliable PWM charge controllers, and they do a very good job. Now let me show you something a bit more modern here. This is a SunSaver MPPT charge controller. This thing can actually handle up to 75 volts of solar panel electricity and turn it down and convert it into 12 or 24 volts to charge the appropriate size battery bank that operates at 12 or 24 volts respectively. This is very handy because it lets you use higher voltage panels and not have to worry about damaging anything. Also, it can switch between 12 and 24 volt battery banks without any issue. Now this one's smaller, it's not like a big charge controller, and it can be used for little solar electric systems, lighting applications, and so on. Now let me show you a big one. Now here is the big daddy, the guy I like to use and I'm very fond of. This is the Morningstar TriStar MPPT 60 charge controller. It can handle 150 volts input, and it can handle 48 volt, 24 volt, or 12 volt battery banks. At full 48 volts, it can handle a 3.6 kilowatt solar array all by itself. It's pretty impressive. One of the things I like most about this guy is there are no fans. Yes, it's a passive thermal design, and it can handle full load at over 100 degrees. I love this. I love things that are designed like that with a conservative thermal footprint and can work at the highest loads without fans. I'm a big fan of that kind of design. Now, this guy, like I said, can handle up to 150 volts of solar input and selectively manage a 12 or 24 or 48 volt battery bank. Now, if you want to have, say, you need to do 12,000 kilowatts of power, well, one of these isn't going to work, right? Well, you can parallel them. You can have 4, 5, 6, whatever. As many as you need, they can manage the solar arrays and get that amount of power into your battery banks, into your inverters, so you can run stuff. You just got to stack them together. There are all sorts of different brands of charge controllers. You see them all on the market. There's this brand, that brand. Even Harbor Freight has some that come with their solar panels. And I hear stories, the real cheap ones, plenty of times saying, well, I had it for a while, and then it just quit working after a month, or it failed catastrophically this way, and all sorts of stuff. I'm very biased towards Morningstar. As you saw the theme here, every one that I got out and showed you guys today was a Morningstar product. The reason why is they don't need active cooling, and they are very conservatively designed on the power electronics. I like conservative design on power electronics. When power electronics fail, it's generally a catastrophic fire and brimstone type of failure. It's bad, really bad. And I do not like things that can cause fires, huge electrical arcs, and everything else to be cheaply made. Yes, that's my bias on that one. So I'm very interested in Morningstar products. Now, there's another brand out there I'm going to get one to test on. I haven't tested yet, but I'm going to play with. It's made by a company called Victron Energy. They also have a very conservative design that does not need active cooling. I think this is a plus, and it's great to have more than one supplier for things. The other thing is their other designs include some that have what I call mid-voltage point. They've got stuff that will do up to 250 volts, and that's a really impressive spot. Good sweet spot for some interesting solar panel runs and stuff like that. Now, also, you see other ones made by Morningstar and some others that do, 600 volts or 1,000 volts on the solar panel array. I am not really that happy to have, 600 volts DC running through some wires and stuff like that are kind of hard to shut off. I mean, you got to put, covers over your panels to literally completely shut them off if you're going to mess with them in the day. You can have your DC disconnects and others like that, but it's still at some point you got some major live wires. I generally like to keep the voltage lower than that, but that's my own personal preference. That's just me. Now, if I was faced with a very constricted run and I had to go very far, pushing it up to 600 volts and getting a charge controller for 600 volts or even 1,000 volts, yes, I would definitely consider that and look at it. So I encourage people when they go look for charge controllers, find ones that are known for really good reliability, have a really good reputation, and are extremely well designed. I do recommend passive thermal cooling systems that have a good thermal envelope, thermal window they can operate in and keep producing power. Like this big Morningstar, it can keep producing full power at over like 105 degrees, I think is where it stops, or 110 or something like that. It's way up there. Doesn't need any cooling for that. That's really impressive. Others you see out there, they're like, oh, if it gets above 75 degrees, it starts derating and decreasing the power it produces. That's not very nice, not very helpful. I hope this explains and answers some of the questions you initially have about charge controllers. Now for the rest of you, we're gonna go into the deep dive. But I'm going inside because these bugs are killing me and I gotta use some pen and paper to explain this thing. All right, we're inside, away from those bugs which were driving me absolutely insane, and I had to do a wardrobe change because it's actually the next day. Got a little off on this one. Things happen, such is life, right? But we're finally finishing this up. Now, I appreciate all of you for sticking around, really watching towards the end, really helpful. Means you have a thirst for knowledge. You also have an attention span greater than that of a gnat. I congratulate you. Too many on the internet are like, ooh, I'm getting bored here. Click off, click off. You know, I often wonder if people actually read books anymore. Is that even a thing for some people? Really? Well, that's a rant for another time. All right, let's talk about what the heck is going on with these charge controllers and what are they attempting to do? All right, I have my old school visual aid here. Yes, you can laugh at me that I don't have PowerPoint or anything else rigged up as the tech guy, right? This was just super easy. I just got a pen out and drew this up, okay? All right, so we're mainly talking about lead acid batteries. Now, the charging methodology and strategy, if we're dealing with like lithium or nickel iron or nickel cadmium, same strategy, basically the same. There's a couple little variances, but don't worry about it. You know, those are little tiny details you don't need to focus on right now. You're not building a charge controller. But anyways, so the first stage of charging, constant current. What it is we need to get the batteries up to a specific level, and we're just going to put amps in them. So like I did, we're going to say 40 amps. Just fill the battery up with 40 amps. Just keep putting that 40 amps in. And we're going to monitor the voltage. The voltage is going to come up. 13.5. 13.7. 14. 14.2. Time to switch. Time to switch. Okay, once it reaches to a set point, and charge controllers vary this based on type of battery and things like that's going on, we're going to switch to the second method. And this is where pulse width modulation charging strategy comes in. And what it is, we're going to do constant voltage. Okay. In that case, we're saying we want to get the batteries at lead acid. Say they're flooded lead acid batteries. And we want them topped off at 15.2 volts, and where they hold for a period of time 15.2 volts correctly. So what it is, we're going to push in current at a specific voltage, 15.2. Push it in. Get it. And what it is these pulses, see? All right, do this. So we're going to do one this long, one this long, one this long. That's what it is pulses of different widths. The skinny ones. What it is going to do lots of really small pulses. Once we're at the very, very end, when the very micro bits, we're trying to get the battery just to the right there, 100% full, optimal charge, right? That's what we're doing, right? And that's what it is basically when you hear that high-pitched noise these charge controllers are making at the end, it's all these little pulses they're sending out, trying to get this thing topped off just at the very tippy top. That's what they're aiming for. And the methodology works really well. Now, let's talk about MPPT charge controllers, right? They got some secret, massive, high-tech abilities that they're able to get a lot more energy out of the solar panels, right? Well, actually, one thing that's kind of silly about that is MPP charge controllers, they also use PWM charging methodology. It's the same thing here, right? Reed, what are you on, man? But they make more power. Yes, they do. Let me explain it. All right, here's my secondary visual aid here. I'll have to glance at it a little bit. Okay, so an MPPT charge controller, they get their power and their ability to be worth that extra premium money because they have a DC to DC converter. All right. See, solar panels, they don't output, exactly what we need for battery charging. I mean, to actually charge a battery with solar panel, you need them to have more volts than the battery, because you got to have a differential and it's got to be high enough to actually push it into the battery. There's a resistance involved there. You got to be over that to start getting the current to go in there, and then you can start filling it up. Okay. Now the thing is though, the solar arrays, they output a constant amount of amperage. So whether you tap that voltage, say if we directly connect it like a PWM controller, the old style, and say my example here, the solar array produces 25 amps and we got 30 volts. All right, that's too high for a 12 volt, but just work with me. This is how I can really, with dramatic influence, show the difference I'm talking about here. But pretend that actually works, right? So the PWM controller takes this 30 volt array, 25 amps, and what it does is it connects it right up to the battery, all right? Now, when it connects up to the battery, the voltage, instead of being 30 volts, it drops down to what the battery's at the moment, right? So say we're in there constant amperage dumping in, and we're at 14 volts, right? Working on that real hard. So we got that in there. What does that work out to? Well, my little visual aid here. All right, so we got 14 volts, 25 amps, whole whopping 350 watts. Hey, energy's going in, charging things up. Well, what do I have noted here for the full array's possible output power? 750 watts. Whoa, that's a huge cut, huh? Big time. So that's the thing, is when you connect that solar panel directly to the battery, well, it drops down to the battery's voltage. It's also like if you go try to jumpstart a car and the battery is like horrifically low, you're not going to get that car to jumpstart because it's not going to come up high enough to get the electronics to engage. You actually got to disconnect that horrible craptastic battery and jump it that way, or bring another battery in. I mean, it's just a no-go solution. I don't know if any of you guys have actually tried to do that when you've had a car that's been horrifically discharged and the battery just is so low you can't get it to come up. Well, that's what's going on. By connecting into the lower voltage source, you're dropping the rest of your other voltage. That's what happens. Same thing with the solar panel. Voltage drops to match up with the battery. Now, given that we're 12 volt battery, it's not going to go much higher than that. Top out at 15 volts. You're still got a huge cut of your electrical power, just cut off at the knees. No help there. Absolutely none. Now, MPP controller, what it's going to do, it's going to use the DC to DC converter to alter this. Now, say the charge controller can handle a maximum of 60 amps, right? Well, it's going to take that 30 volts, it's going to alter it and drop it down to the battery needs, say 14 volts at the time, but it's going to push the amps up, right? So we see here, the amps are going to become 53.5 amps. I rounded it a little bit. And then, if you take that, multiply it out, look, 749 watts. Huh, that's a much bigger difference of the amount of power actually going into our battery, right? That's the thing. MPPT controllers have a DC to DC converter to compensate for this. Also means, is like what I mentioned out earlier, you can have MPP charge controllers that take really high voltage from solar panel arrays, like 600 volts or 1,000 volts. Now, why on earth would you actually want that high of a voltage? Let me set these down. Well, we are talking about far distances. We need really far distances to run, and you need to get stuff back without losing massive amounts of energy. Voltage. Absolutely have to get that voltage higher. It's like our transmission lines that cross all over the country and every place else. Well, the ones, just localities, they're 23.5 thousand volts. Stuff going across the country, it's 500,000 to 1,000,000 volts. Big time voltage. And we'll get into the math and everything else of what's going on. I'll be covering that in the next video. But I hope this explains a lot, gets an idea of why an MPP controller is worth the price premium and what it's doing for you. Take care, everyone. This is Reed, out for now. Let me show you another one here, which is its brother, actually. A little bigger brother here. Oh, that was horrible. Right in the ear.